Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good. How you doing, Jamie?
Doing well. I'm sorry for keeping you waiting. I just got tied up on a call for a few moments.
Oh, you're good. You are good. Is this a good time
Yeah,
to?
now I've got a good block of time, so we're good.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time just to, chat in general.
Yeah,
It's
of course.
been a while since I've talked to anyone at Say, and it's just nice to kind of do these little interviews just for people in general who either subscribe or, just want to get to know you. So it's
Yeah. You previously were speaking with Janet.
yeah, probably like 1 to 3 years ago. I don't remember.
Okay, all right.
Uh, yeah, yeah. But happy to be speaking with you, very much so. Yeah. How's your day going so far?
I'm doing well. I'm actually I'm outside. It's kind of nice here in New York. I got the cafe right behind me here. It is a little crazy with the holidays because we got kind of weird in between weeks, so a lot of tourists and such, and as a result, there's not a lot of space in there right now. So that's why I'm outside, which is a good problem to have. Yeah.
Not too cold outside?
No, it's actually it's generally nice. There's still snow on the ground, but it's not brutal yet.
Good. I'm glad to hear. Well, you mind just like telling me a little bit about kind of just your coffee journey and just a little bit about yourself? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I have been working on and off at Say for roughly the entire time that Say has existed.
Wow.
Was very good friends with Lance and Tobin, the founders. We worked together at a larger company in New York, Stumptown, for the at the Ace Hotel, which was the first New York location, 2009. And eventually they split off with a mission of making better coffee and doing things at a much smaller single origin terroir driven level. Founded a coffee company called Lofted, which they were roasting in their loft and delivering in a truck and doing very bootstrappy Bushwick things. Um, and then yeah, we kind of stayed on similar but diverging paths of specialty coffee in New York as the industry started to grow, and it was quite a journey from 2009 to here. But they grew their company, opened a retail spot, and eventually moved the roaster from the loft to the retail spot, and rebranded to Say. Roughly around, I want to say 2007. And I left Stumptown. I had gone through a couple buyouts at that point. And so was the first manager here. Have worked and done a lot of wholesale work in the meantime, and have worked both on and off in the cafe as resale manager now in two different stints. And now my job kind of encompasses all of retail development in New York, training and education, as well as running the retail cafe operations.
Man, quite a bit. Quite a
Yeah,
bit. Uh,
yeah. So it's a little bit of a long way of saying I'm old and have been around New York coffee for a while.
Yeah. Oh, that's one way. That's one way to look at it. But genuinely glad to hear. It sounds like you have quite the experience. And honestly, I haven't spent much time in New York particularly, but like you kind of touched probably a smidge on it, but like what to you makes a little bit different from like other US roasters and or other maybe cafes in New York?
Yeah. Well, to speak about the coffee itself, I think, our mission has stayed the same since the very beginning. And now having more buying power, having more experience, having years under our belt, we're just able to do it better. But the goal has always been to source the world's best coffees, and present them kind of as transparently as possible. So in the beginning, it was, forming relationships with people and releasing coffees in a true single origin fashion. First it was just from farms, then it became more variety driven, and now we're doing as kind of granular as different parts of the harvest or different lot separations, variety separations from the same farm. Transparency is key in presenting that because we really think that coffee is a reflection of the producers and the work and the terroir that it comes from. And so our goal along the way is just to represent that in a transparent manner. So the roasting part of it is really only one step and really one that's kind of important, but not as important as sourcing the coffee. And so, yeah, the goal again, like has not changed. We just now have more relationships, and we're able to travel to origin more and build on relationships that we have to meet new producers, to work more directly with producers, to work on things like fermentation, processing, washing, drying, that kind of can help guide their coffees in a way that reflect what we're looking for, which to speak about kind of the profile that we're looking for generally is very clean, washed, nuanced coffees, which kind of is our it goes along with the idea of transparency because processing is a big part of coffee. But I think going too heavy on processing also covers up the kind of what we're looking for in the terroir and the production part of coffee itself. It's when we taste more processing coffee than the terroir of coffee, we know that we've gone like a little bit too far. So helping work with producers and guiding them towards what we're looking for, which is not to say that anaerobic thermoshock or any of that stuff is wrong per se, but it's not what necessarily we're seeking. So yeah, I mean, again, like nothing has really changed. Our goal is source the world's best coffees, and really, we are willing to pay as high of a price and go as micro as we can to our detriment. You know, we exported Kamavindi geisha from Kenya last year, 2 years ago actually, and we weren't even able to roast it because the lot was so small. We didn't have equipment that could get it that small, and so, but we couldn't pass up the opportunity to have, Kenyans first exportable geisha lot. So it's like we have to buy that because we're interested in tasting it and we're interested in the progress that that means for Kenya as a whole and for single variety lots of Kenya. So I think that yeah, the focus and the kind of dedication to the coffee itself and the processing and the production part of that, from working with really great people is really what makes a special. And I think there are plenty of other people out there who are doing a really great job at it as well. But our goal is to just continue to drive it forward to be the best that we possibly can.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things that makes, you guys so, I don't know, prevalent and just like set apart, like you said, is like being kind of terroir driven roastery, Uh, Growing up, I genuinely believe terroir like only referred to the soil. But yeah, like to you and to people that say like when you say terroir, just for like people watching, like what does that completely entail for y'all?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is soil, and it is soil nutrition. It's the areas that the coffee is grown. So parts of different hills that get more sunlight or more heavy winds, temperature fluctuation, all that kind of stuff. And then the greater kind of terroir question is also the processing of it and how you're approaching that. Different fermentation techniques, slow drying. So having some control over that, because production is important. You obviously need to take the cherry from the tree and get it to a point where it's dried and able to be roasted. But kind of interfering that in a minimal way. So creating coffees that can express what's being given to you from the soil, from the temperature, from the variety, and trying to impart, a naturalness to that, if you will. And I think there's similarities to natural wine and things like that, where it's minimal intervention. Obviously, intervention is needed. You need to get there somehow. But working with people to kind of create, profiles, work on drying techniques that will make that coffee more expressive of itself, if you will. So yeah, and that's where you see a lot of our coffees now. We're working on, kind of individual separations of lot varieties in terms of, different drying processes in terms of different areas or paths of the harvest in Colombia, especially as we can see kind of like how does the temperature and climate change affect the second to the third harvest, the last harvest later in the season, stuff like that. And it's interesting to see that sometimes there are drastic differences and sometimes they're very similar. But why not release them individually if we can, so that we can really just get a sense of a true kind of place and time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I feel just in the last year or so I'm starting to get to know a little bit of, like just different harvest times. And like I have a friend who, has been working in sales at a roastery called Manhattan, for years, and he's moving on to a different roastery. And yeah, even he was like mentioning different producers having, different lots for different harvests and which ones he likes more and things like that I'm not, I don't know, as privy to or pay attention to as much. And so like that's something that just like even in the last year I've been like, oh, like now when I'm like looking at the, El Mirador and it's like the third harvest, like, okay, like you've been working with them for so long and so forth. And yeah, it's something that's like I'm kind of excited to see a little bit more of. And, I think for us, like September is a good example that like they also are now putting like the harvest date, of like when it was collected. And, I think you guys are doing the similar. And so yeah, it's just really interesting and very informational driven. And so it's kind of nice to just like have all that and be like, all right, what's going on? I'm just
Yeah.
happy to be here and to taste it. Yeah.
When I approach like wholesale relationships a lot, I feel like the best thing that I can do is give people kind of the deck of cards, and whether or not you refer to or play those cards at any time is totally up to you because we have a ton of information on the card, and some of it may be more or less relevant than others. Coffee harvested in January in Ethiopia being consumed in December is sort of relevant to knowing like, okay, it takes a long time for coffee to get from Ethiopia to us. So you know that, okay, it's very far away. It has to travel in a different manner than coffee that's freshly harvested and arrives to us from Colombia that was harvested in August or September. Um, does it necessarily mean that the coffee in January is better than the coffee in February or December? Not necessarily. But if you have all that information, you can kind of draw some parallels. And I think for every coffee, it's a little bit different as to all those different factors that play into it. And really, it's a combination of all those. It's harvest date, but it's also everything else. It's variety, it's processing, it's lot separation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah. So after, as you've mentioned, being in the industry for so long, have you come to have a particular region of the world or particular varietal that you just get truly ecstatic about every time you get to taste it?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. Ask me next month, and it'll be a different answer. I love Ethiopian coffees. I've always loved Ethiopian coffees, and it makes sense because Ethiopia is kind of the birthplace of coffee. And I think that we see really excellent quality year over year from true kind of typical Ethiopian washed landrace varieties. I'm really excited about the work that we've been doing honey process varieties, but in
Yeah.
a very sorry, in a very clean manner. So when we source honey processed coffees, adding an element of kind of like a depth of sweetness and complexity, but not in a way that covers it up where we're talking about kind of like full naturals and kind of too much process on there. That said, we do source some naturals if they're very clean naturals. But I think recently, we as a team and me particularly, we've been really fascinated with developments that we've seen in Kenya. So we've been doing a lot of single variety separation in Kenya, which hasn't really existed in the past. The Kenyan coffees for the last couple of years have been had some more difficult harvests, had a lot of kind of bleed over from the coffee market in terms of like less emphasis on quality driven lot separations. And so being able to work with farmers in washing stations in Kenya, where we're really doing pure SL28, SL34 separations and putting more of a focus on that has been really incredible. The coffees out of Kenya this last year have been as good as they've been in, I feel like, a decade. And they really bring me back into, tasting my first Kenyan coffees. So I think the Kenyan coffees this year have been really exciting. And I think our work in Peru, especially, is going to be coming up and really, really exciting because a lot of these places have never separated their coffee in a real way, have never done individual variety separations or even lot separations or farm separations. Might have been blended into a regional lot somewhere and getting mixed in. But now we're able to taste varieties and places that have never really been truly tasted before. So we've released a lot of coffees, SL9 varieties, which we still don't know a lot about. It's sort of related to Gesha. It's sort of related to Ethiopian varieties, but it really kind of grows in Peru and has these incredible kind of fruit forward tropical characteristics that are, unlike Colombian or Ecuadorian or surrounding countries, and they're really unique to their own. And we just kind of scratched the surface on there last year, and the results were incredible. And I think, over the next couple of months, we'll see a lot of very, very fun Peruvian coffees that, again, like have never really been tasted before in this true separated way. And I'm really excited because the quality there was already there, and now that these producers are understanding what it means to produce in a specialty level and work on their fermentations and work on their processing, where no one was giving any sort of guidance or oversight before. It's just going to get better and better and better. So yeah, those are kind of the two things that I'm very excited about. But like I said, I love classic Colombian pink bourbones. I love churrosos, which are kind of big and kind of more bombastic Colombian offerings. I love our Ecuadorian coffee. So I it's like choosing your favorite child.
Yeah. I love to hear it. Yeah, Ethiopians are always good. I've gotta just like kind of compliment you and also like just reiterate like I think it was like a couple years ago I had a Peru from y'all and I really don't remember where, but I just remember having a Peru from you that was just like truly fantastic. And it was one of those moments where like yeah, it was at a time where I feel like I just wasn't seeing a lot of Peru offerings from many roasters, and I just remember being like, "This is like really good. Like what? Like it kind of hit a gold mine, and I remember that. And like, I think the following year we had like one or two more from like different other roasters. And so, yeah, so I just think that's kind of neat that you brought that up. And yeah, I know very, very little about the SL9 variety. So that's just cool to hear. So thanks for
Yeah,
sharing.
we don't know much about it either. When it came across our cupping table, Lance, who sources our coffee, he brought it to genetic testing, and it's like this is what we kind of know about it. We still don't really know that much about it. We know that it tastes awesome, and that every single one we put on the cupping table was like, wow, this is incredible. This is incredible, and it just, I think we'll hopefully have some more information as we bring it to market because we want to be as transparent as we can about this when we say this is an SL9 and this is why we think it's an SL9 and why we think it's not this other thing, but maybe actually it's related to this thing. It'll be cool to kind of untangle that mystery because for the first time in a long time, it's like, oh, this is truly something unique and unknown. But we know that the coffee tastes really great, so
I'm
that
done.
matters. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think this is a good time to have you chat just a little bit about all the coffees that we got for our subscription. Um, Maybe starting with just because you kind of mentioned how y'all have been doing some a little bit more honey processed, and I believe when I read about the Tommy Rooted essay that this white honey was specifically for you guys at Say.
Yeah, so this lot we purchased and we've done collaborations with Tamaru in the past, who really is doing kind of single variety, single farm production in Ethiopia in a way that most people are not. Last year we worked on a couple different white honey, controlled natural variations of this, and he held his auction for the first time this year for the public, so people are actually able to buy Tamaru auction lots. Yeah, the white honey is amazing. We had a washed version, which was a much smaller lot, and the white honey, which is a little bit larger, which gives us the chance to enjoy it over a longer period of time. Because the sad part about our coffee is we love it so much, and then it's gone in a week. But yeah, Tamaru is a very cool producer who's getting some, very high accolades in Ethiopia. He basically kind of started a coffee project in his hometown later in life and entered Ethiopia's second Cup of Excellence competition and won. Coming from great terroir, first and foremost, really high elevations, and
Mhm.
doing really kind of controlled work with washing, which in Ethiopia is very traditional. Tends to be, kind of a lot of the same traditions that have been used for, long periods of time. Leaving some mucilage on, in this case, white honey, so leaving some mucilage intact. A lot of what this is done is really intentional, and what we found with white honey lots specifically is that the kind of more controlled ability and less fermentation that's happening in the honey process gives us a little bit of that cleaner profile while still maintaining a lot of complexity and a lot of sweetness. So as when we worked in the past with him on collaborative lots, it was a lot of focus on putting coffee on the drying beds in a very controlled, like single layer, so that the coffee doesn't contact other coffee and therefore isn't creating more unnecessary fermentation. Not unnecessary, but not undesired, I say in our case, where we want something a little cleaner. So this really controlled element of being able to set things like very fastidiously on a single layer on the drying beds to kind of like create a very long, slow drying process that isn't adding anything throughout that process. Obviously, we're seeing washing and fermentation and honey all kind of playing into that, but in a very kind of controlled way. And I think the profile is really beautiful. It has very classic Ethiopian wash characteristics, stone fruit, citrus, black tea, all that stuff. And what the white honey adds just like a little extra oomph, a little bit of layer of complexity without going into kind of a full natural, big blueberry syrupy kind of natural element, but still kind of leaning more towards what we consider to be kind of like our preferred Sey profile.
Yeah. This is funny enough, this is I think the only coffee that we got to sample just like before we're getting, kind of these other coffees, and it was just remarkably sweet. Just a true delight. This is kind of an offshoot, but just like a fun random fact about I guess St. Louis, roughly, is so Tommy Roo's cousin lives here, um, and has started his own importing company called Moy Coffee, and yeah, just a great guy name for all that like we're friends with, and he's just doing really cool stuff as like a young guy who's like went to college here in St. Louis and dropped out to just do this and is now doing a great job. And like, it's just like, it's just a very random thing that like Tommy Roo's cousin randomly lives here in St. Louis. Yeah, just so odd that we but anyway, just because of that, like yeah, me and a couple people here, like we've all been introduced to Tommy Roo when we've gone to like Expo or
Oh,
stuff,
yeah.
of course. Tommy Roo, as far as I know, hasn't visited St. Louis, but like, it's been great to touch base with him and yeah, just like through his cousin for all, who's like also a great person in general. And so it's just like very, very random. So that's
That's
just
super
more
cool.
yeah, it's more of just a fun fact for you, but yeah, you're right. His coffees have been absolutely astounding every time we've had them. Um, yeah, we got to see that he did do it auction lots, which is just awesome. Some of the prices were a little up there, so I have not tasted any.
And I think that's a very kind of interesting and fun part of the specialty industry is we're seeing auction prices on a lot of stuff higher than it's ever been before because people are interested in sourcing this coffee, and we saw it with the Best of Panama this year as well, and now people doing private auctions for their individual farms and places like that. It's great for the industry as a whole. I think if coffee can be recognized for more than just a commodity good, and that those prices can creep up and trickle, kind of from the high end down, and the base cup of coffee for people who are drinking excellent coffee is $6 rather than five, then it's great for everybody. Producers get paid more, and we all look at it as less of a commodity good. But it is crazy because like yeah, the pricing, especially over this last year, we were looking at purchasing some auction lots from Panama, and the pricing just went through the roof. And we're lucky enough to have direct relationships with a lot of people like Tamaru, like Sophia, like Naguo, a lot of these Panamanian farms where even then at our direct level pricing, it's still very, very expensive.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely insane and exciting at the same time
Yeah.
because, like you said, if these producers are getting more money for their high quality product, let's go.
Yeah,
Uh,
and we at the cafe when we're serving because we do serve all these coffees, and our single cup brews are 40 to 60 to $70 sometimes. We look at it as when we educate our staff about the same level of the highest quality of wine, of spirits, of anything else, and to really taste truly some of the best coffee in the world produced at a world class level, extremely small supplies, extremely fastidious production, auctions, all these factors that go into the pricing. The ability to taste the world's best coffee at $70 compared to your $5 drip at 12 times the cost. If you're talking about a $20 bottle of wine at $12 the cost, you're not approaching the world's best wine. So it's really, in some sense a bargain, and it's hard to say that about $70 coffee, but I think the relative value there, especially for people who are able to afford that as a relative luxury,
oh,
it's absolutely worth it. It's you're tasting some of the stuff, the best coffees in the entire world. So
yeah, yeah. Real quick, just I'm interested in New York, like, you have these pour overs that are that much. Do they sell out? Like, do you get a great clientele that are like, yes, let's do it?
yeah, I mean, we are lucky enough that people come to us for that reason, and we have a crowd that appreciates and is looking to have this experience. Because if you're going to come to New York and you're going to taste coffee, there's a good chance you're probably going to end up at Say. And if you have the disposable income or the interest in tasting some of these things, you may not have the opportunity to do so. The
Yeah.
other opportunity is to buy a bag for yourself, which is already expensive. So for some people, maybe buying one cup is and brewed by someone else rather than stressing about brewing it yourself is worth it. A lot of these lots are very small. I mean, we talk about the cafe getting a couple pounds, and some going to wholesale and some going to subscriptions and online buyers. So we aren't selling out thousands and thousands of pounds of $7 cup coffee, but we do sell out of them. We sell it on our retail shelves. We sell it as single cup brews, and we recently did a very big revamp of our espresso program, which is leading into some kind of more exciting things for the future. But we've now started to stockpile some frozen coffees as well. So ideally, in a year or two, we'll have the ability to taste, Tamaru's lots from 3 years, year over year over year, or
Yeah.
we'll reserve Think of Sophia lot that if you missed it in the one week that it was there, we might have it, 6 months from now on the frozen menu. So
Oh man, that's pretty tight. I'm not gonna lie. We don't have anything like that in St. Louis, so that would be a fun time.
yeah, I mean, and honestly, like I think we have always looked to do that, and I think we have been working on it for a long time, and getting coffee to a place where we feel comfortable that everything is brewed and executed to the level that it deserves. It takes a while to get there, and and just the way that now we can serve it across both single cup. We use AeroPress, so not technically pour over, but single cup brews, and now espresso is really exciting because we can kind of play with the menu in a fun way where we're able to put it across a couple different options and get very different expressions. The work that we've been doing on our frozen espresso menu has been a long time coming, but it's really exciting to taste these coffees in a way that they've never really been tasted before, and not feel like, okay, I'm going to throw it through this espresso machine and I might not get a great job. It's like, actually, no, I know that this is going to come through and it's going to taste really incredible and also very different than an AeroPress or a filter might be.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, probably like a year or between 1 and 2 years ago, we kind of went through a stint of having, more expensive coffees. And, they were mainly from Mame, but every once in a while it was like from Cat Felix or, other roasters. And they would range kind of between like 12 and like what we would serve up to like, I think 25 was the most expensive coffee we've ever served. And when we first did this, we had some people actually like, whoa, this is like really good. And I don't know if it's that over time, people here in St. Louis don't want to spend as much money, but like it's gotten harder, or at least for us at Comment, to specifically charge, this much money, And we recently had Sudan Rume produced by Jose Lasso in Colombia, and it was very, very good. It was $17 a cup. And people who had it were like, this is unbelievably worth it. But like it was just on the menu, kind of forever. And it was one of those where it's like, I don't know why, but it feels like it's almost gone down for us. And so like genuinely speaking, like we're trying to figure out how do we get St. Louis people to like want to try these things, because we want people to come and have a good time and have these crazy coffees. And yet I feels like it's getting harder for us. I don't know if that's, I'd probably have to like look at more data, but it's like just been interesting because other than us, there's not particularly other cafes in St. Louis ever charging that much. I think the most other cafes in St. Louis, roughly $10 and under. And so it's been like, yeah, it's just been interesting that we've like been going down in very high priced coffees, still good coffees, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of tricky things there, and I think, like I said, we're very lucky. People know who we are
Oh
and come to
yeah.
New York, and we're New York. It's an extremely populated city full of coffee geeks and people who visit that are coffee geeks.
Yeah.
I think the rise of the home barista is also something that really factors into that because people are making incredible coffee at home now and have access to the information, equipment to feel like, okay, I actually might be able to make coffee on par with what I have in a cafe. Where previously, I think even pre-COVID, just a couple of years ago, it was always like, okay, no, if you really want excellent coffee, you have to go to these places to make it. And now people can feel confident that like actually make a really excellent coffee at home using a really nice grinder, but even like an OXO or like a Pulsar, and you're using sub $100 brewing equipment to get really excellent coffee out of that.
Yeah.
So I think that yeah, just the rise of the home barista, and honestly, we take a lot of the I wouldn't say inspiration, but like we're always listening to what's happening at home because I think it feeds into the cafe as well. We've done everything in the cafes. I think collectively as a whole, a lot the same way every time. So it's just it's always interesting to learn and hear about what's happening and how people are enjoying coffee, whether it be in a cafe or at home, bringing that into the retail experience. And then there's a lot of other factors. I mean, right now, like in New York, especially, Instagrammable signature drinks are getting a moment, and everyone wants cold foam and matcha and ube. So that's part of it too. It's a little bit of a different audience, but like that is a thing.
I'm dying. Yeah, I definitely that's slowly happening here too. So that's actually kind of funny you mentioned that. I'm done. Well, moving on. If you don't mind, I'd love to hear a little bit about William Ortiz as well. This is a producer I don't think I've ever heard of. So generally excited to have this coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I cupped it for the first time today, so it's very new to me as well. And I'll speak broadly because we are always bringing in new
Yeah,
producers
you're good.
are unfamiliar and we work with them and we hope that we continue to have long relationships with them. But we're constantly looking for new relationships that are bringing us coffee. A lot of the stuff is places that we either know or are friends with coffee producers or are introed by our importing or exporting partners who say, okay, these people over here. Why don't you talk to these people? They're really presenting in some excellent stuff. Lance may or may not have a chance to visit them every single time before we bring in their coffee or know a lot about them. But if the coffee is really amazing, then we can continue to build a relationship. So we have producers, Chirroso producers specifically, people like David Barrio, people like
Yeah.
Daniel and Jose Caro. Um, and we have people that we work with in Huila who are bringing us Pink Bourbon every year, Wilson Alba, Octavio Rueda. So yeah, I don't know a lot about this producer specifically. I tasted the coffee today; it was beautiful, and I think Chirroso is just a really cool variety because you get a very different expression of what we typically tend to see. Certainly the coffees that we buy, which are very clean, nuanced, kind of sparkly pink bourbons. The Chirrosos are bigger and kind of bombastic and more fruit forward and show more tropicals and can be sometimes like a little bit like big and syrupy. And I think this is a really nice, clean expression that kind of hits the middle where we get a lot of those big fruit flavors, a lot of the tropicals, but still has like really nice nuance, complexity, great structure. Chirroso specifically coming from Morale and in general, I know, speaking to Lance has been a tough harvest over there just in terms of getting consistent quality. There's also more competition for people buying churrosos, where in the past it wasn't. So there's a lot of factors into sourcing really excellent churroso. And also just given the fact that the harvest has been a little bit trickier in Colombia this year, which is that is the world, and that unfortunately we see really great harvests and really difficult harvests. But I'm really happy with this coffee. Like I said, I only cupped it this morning for the first time. I'm glad you're asking about it now, and I'm not completely thrown off guard because I try to maintain, a good sense of what our coffee's coming in. But we also release 300 coffees a year. So
Which is insane. 300 is good Lord. My gosh. I don't know how you guys do it, but I'm glad
a lot
you
of a lot
are.
of cupping, a lot of cupping.
And well, the other two coffees, I think you mentioned one of them, Octavio Rueda, and I think we're also getting the Ethiopia Elora project, if I remember correctly. But yeah, what was if you've tasted them, what have you liked about them, or is there anything that you're like, man, these guys are just doing a great job?
Well, they're all doing a great job. Yeah, Octavio is a producer we worked with for a couple of years now. Consistently delivers us just like really excellent pink bourbon that I always think of as like a very classic Say profile. Like when
Mhm.
I taste with our new employees and we taste through pink bourbons and Octavio's on the table, I'm like, this is kind of what I think of like a very classic Say coffee, nuanced, structured, very clean. And I think the best kind of pink bourbons and Octavio's coffees, which we have so many different deliveries that sometimes they are like really popping and sometimes they're also really good but maybe not really popping. So there's never a, oh, Octavio's coffees are bad. It's just like great and excellent. But I think that yeah, the best characteristics that his coffees display are kind of this really lovely like kind of black tea, Arnold Palmer, kind of citrus with like a little bit of dark fruit mixed in. And I think some of the really excellent expressions that we get from him have shown almost a little bit of a Kenyan-y sort of feel, where they get a little bit of that dark fruit and black tea and kind of like an African
Mm.
manner, which makes sense because Pink Bourbon is essentially a Ethiopian variety coming from Africa, grown in Colombia. So I see elements of that here and there. This delivery specifically is just as classic as kind of I remember, and it's one of our better Pink Bourbons we brought in this year. It's very clean, nuanced, approachable. It's a great coffee for everybody, and
Yeah.
my dad, who I bring coffee to for years, who is not necessarily a specialty coffee drinker or even a self-professed light roast drinker, is a coffee that he would love. It's a very classic profile. So it's approachable for everybody, but it's still you can dig in and there's a lot of great complexity there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the Allura project is cool. This is the first year we sourced from Allura. We got 4 separate lots that we broke out across the release season. This is a washed lot. We have also gotten a honey process as well as a fermented honey process. And this being sort of the tail end of the Colombian or the Ethiopian season, shows very classic Ethiopian profile. Black tea, stone fruit. It's not quite as big and fruit forward and juicy as like a tamaru, which comes from a little bit higher altitude and is also honey processed. But I think again, in the way that Octavio is kind of a really awesome, great baseline Colombian offering. This is like a great baseline Ethiopian offering. It's everything that you kind of expect out of a washed Ethiopian coffee, that just kind of like hits all those points and is also super approachable. And, anyone can just be like, cool, that is an excellent coffee. It's really well balanced. It has nice fruit, but it's not going to hit me over the head with like a extreme juiciness or anything like that.
Sure. Um, uh, I have there's a couple people in St. Louis who work in the coffee industry, and one of them has said that he really thinks that all pink Bourbons have a savory element to them. Personally speaking, I feel like of what I have tasted, I don't particularly find that to be for every pink bourbon. But yeah, for you guys, I'd say, what do you think of? I mean, obviously you mentioned genetically comes from Ethiopia. But yeah, when you think of pink bourbon, you said you think of this Octavia Rueda. Yeah, do you have a flavor profile other than what you said that you also kind of consider to be pink bourbon-esque or not particularly?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point because I think that there now that pink bourbon is kind of a little bit of a buzzword in Colombia, and everyone is looking to source pink bourbon. There's a wide variety of it, quality wise, and
Mm. Yeah.
we see pink bourbons that are higher quality and lower quality, and obviously we're seeking to source coffees that are, of course, the highest quality. But there can be, and it's based on density, so based on sorting, on elevation, things that can creep in like a little bit of nuttiness here and there. There can be, especially based on development, like some kind of more savory, like vegetal characters for sure. And that's, we don't talk a lot about roast because ideally we are roasting at a level where we're not tasting roast, but everything is feeling fully developed in a way that brings out natural sweetness. I'll say too that one thing that has helped, and to speak about kind of density and nuttiness, and as it refers to some Colombian coffees, Mexican coffees, Brazilian coffees, etc. We recently brought in a new piece of equipment last year. That's a color sorter, so we're able to do more intense sorting on our coffees, which basically eliminate Quakers, underripes, and things like that. And so what we're getting is a little bit kind of deeper, rounder sweetness, eliminating some of those savory notes, which is again a piece of equipment that we brought in recently. And I think it really it sharpens the edges, and it's almost like using a mixer. Where you can't necessarily turn a bad song good by mixing it, but you can adjust the levels, the EQs, the bass, the treble to kind of get everything perfectly dialed in. So, approaching things with a very kind of specific way of roasting, but also using that color sorter to sort certain things that are undesirable. And mainly we're talking about Quakers and kind of nutty flavors out. And we've also found that there's like a balance. If you sort too much out, you're kind of losing that range. So finding that kind of optimal balance is something that we've dialed in over time. But I think has immediately brought like kind of a better, natural sweetness to our coffees. It brings a little bit kind of more roundness. It eliminates those nutty flavors, and it's interesting because I've spent more time on the cupping table right around this transition, and it's not BS. It tastes better. The coffee does
Yeah.
taste better using the color sorter. Pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. I've, heard about it from a couple of the roasters that we work with, or have worked with. And yeah, it's one of those where it's like, um, I don't remember if I've told you this, but like we just recently started roasting, so we're like brand new to roasting all the above. But like that's something that like our roasters are already looking into the future and like we want to get this at some point, so it's just kind of cool to hear that like everyone who's had it has been like, man, it's been great. Like nothing but good stuff and helping quality. Yeah, all the above.
Pretty awesome. And I mean, we're just using it as a polish. There are a lot of ways to use it. You could use it as a larger roaster if you're buying 84 point or 82 point coffee to filter out as much stuff as you can to get it to a drinkable 85, 86 level. What we're using it to do is, buy 87, 88 point coffee and polish it to like an 88 and a half, so it's a more nuanced approach, but it's a pretty cool thing. I mean, when you think about like, and when we think about cupping, we're putting 11 and a half grams in that cup and we're pouring water on top. And if you have one Quaker in there, that's a significant amount of that cup. So if you think about that spread out over a batch brew or an espresso, like, these underripes are really contributing, a significant amount where even if it's a small amount of your coffee, it is still enough that it's perceptible and significant.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're genuinely very excited to have you guys back and to kind of reassess how we work with, say, like every year in some capacity. Genuinely, it was a delight, like I mentioned, to cup you on the table and like everyone was like, good. Like,
Great. Great.
because I mean, I don't remember who I was corresponding with. It may have been Janet, but generally like how we go about QCing when we get, samples from roasters, we cup as a team as much as we can, and we have our green buyer, our roasters there, and a couple other people, and we invite all staff to always come to these cuppings, and it's just always a delight when we're all there, we're all tasting it, and everyone's, like, this is good, like whoever this is, let's do it, and we cut blind and then we're, revealing and it's like, hey, it's say,
Nice.
but
Love
it, it was a good time. And like after that, we'll always, brew whatever samples up on like pour over or espresso, just to be like, is there anything else we're missing? And it's just a delight whenever it's like good on the cupping table, good on brew, good on espresso. It's like, all right, like this is really good. Like we're all right to go ahead and do this again. So generally excited to get you guys in next week and to taste some tasty coffee and share it with people here. So yeah, thanks for taking the time, Jamie. Really appreciate it. If you do you have any other closing things that you want to just chat about or anything of the sort?
I mean, I could talk about coffee for a long time, and we already have. So I love talking about coffee. I love talking about what we do at Zay. And really, we're appreciative because we only have one retail operation. We sell coffee to people online, and I think it's partners like you guys who, we want to work with people who recognize the work that we put in and want to do a great job. And in my wholesale role, a lot of people, ask about like, well, what makes a great partner? And it's like, if you want to put in the time and work to really dedicate yourself to representing us, then I want to work with you. So,
Yeah.
um, understanding about, brewing and talking about producers and terroir is something that I do every single day. But I'm only one person in New York. And so it's people like you guys all over the country, all over the world that really are kind of like helping us. Because honestly, the more coffee that we buy, the better coffee we can buy, the more that we can work with new producers, the more that we can continue to, move on our mission, which has remained unchanged, but remains to, really kind of push coffee to the highest levels that we can. And then we're all better because we're all drinking better coffee in the future. So, I'm really appreciative for the work that you guys do, and it was a pleasure talking to you. And like I said, I could talk about coffee for a long time. So always happy to chat.
That sounds great. I think we will probably have some more chats in the future for sure, Jamie. I'm done. Well, thanks again. I'm sure we'll keep up to date as time goes on, but generally appreciate it. Have a
Yeah,
great rest of your day.
great talking to you. You too. Talk soon.
Awesome. Bye.